Hi, this is Ruth Pierce. I'm the relationship maximizer because I love to help you take your relationships to the next level. And we're talking all relationships, different categories, different types. We are talking about love yourself like your life depends on it. This is an earth-breaking, earth-shaking, transformational book about how important it is to love yourself first. Put that oxygen mask on yourself before you try to help other people. This is a presentation where it's part of a mastermind through Meetup, and this is not the replay. It's just me talking about the material. This is the third session, and we're going to be talking about 3 additional practices that Camille did in his journey of learning to love and value himself. But before that we do, I want to do just a very quick review of what we had in session 2. Well, even session 1 to some degree, because he started with the vow to love myself like my life depended on it. And then in the second session, we talked a lot about some practices that he was doing. Now, Camille was in a very bad spot. He could barely get out of bed, very depressed. And these are the practices he did while he was in that place to get him out of that. The mental loop was one where you just said continually, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself. Now, if you want to do more, learn more about the loops, go back to the session before this and you can look that up. As this is just a quick review of what those were. And then the second one was meditation, which we've heard a lot about meditation through the years. Now, what Camille did, he picked a song, and the song he picked was instrumental, and it was 7 minutes long. So that's how long his meditation lasted. And he would just do an in-breath and say, I love myself. And then the out-breath was letting stuff go, letting the light shine into him and letting the negative stuff go out. I love myself. Actually, on the in-breath, he would do some of both. Just let the light in or say, I love myself, and let things go. And how important is that for both of those to let that love in, like that light in, and then to let the negative go. And then we also talked about the 10 breaths. And he did something very similar without his instrumental. And this was, well, it was during the transition too. But just throughout the day, he would pause and take 10 deep cleansing breaths. And we've heard a lot about the breaths and how important that is to cleanse ourselves of negative stuff that we've taken in, the stress and all of that. But on the same thing, on the intake, I love myself. The out breath, letting things go. So that's the 10 breaths. So we had the mental loop, the meditation, the 10 breaths. And then the third one is the mirror. And that's when you looked in the mirror. And he did it for 5 minutes. And look yourself in the eye and say, I love you. I love myself. Just to get that loop going, getting that, because our beliefs are so important. And if we do not believe that we love ourselves, it's going to affect everything. Now, I do like what Camille says, in that he says, say it anyway, on all this stuff. Say it anyway. Even if you don't believe it, say it anyway. Because your beliefs will change the more you say it. And then this last one from last session was the one question. And this was when he was out in the world more. He'd been moving around. He wasn't as depressed. But it was when people were starting to make demands on him. So he had one question he'd ask himself. If I loved myself, would I let myself experience this? If I loved myself, would I let myself experience this? And that is so important, isn't it? So now we're moving on. I'm on my right page that I want for my notes. And this session 3 that we're going to cover on July 2nd. And the first one is called Thought. That is the subtitle of it. And he would think about what was really true in his life and what wasn't. And he says, I enjoyed thinking about it, but mainly to remind myself that ultimately everything is theory and beliefs. While he enjoys thinking about it, what he truly cares about is what works, what creates magic in his life. And what I have come to realize, especially in the last several years, is that our beliefs are so important. What I believe about myself, what I believe about others, what I believe about my circumstances. And if you're a person of faith, what you believe about God or how everything was created in this world. And so I would go along with what he says there. Then he goes on to say, when he goes back and talks about what creates magic in his life, this is what he says. And I think I paraphrased it, it's not a quote. This is what I know. The mind left to itself repeats the same stories, the same loops, mostly the ones that don't serve us. So what's practical, what's transformative is to consciously choose a thought, then practice it again and again with emotion, with feeling, and acceptance. You're laying down new sympathetic, I'm not going to get that word out right, but pathways until the brain starts playing it automatically. Do this with enough intensity over time, and the mind will have no choice. This is how it operates. If you have trouble believing that, I want to ask you this question. Where do you think your original loops came from? Something that happened in your life, maybe even in your childhood, that kept being repeated. Now, when you choose that thought that you're going to let flow in your mind, practice it until the thought you choose becomes your primary loop. Do it until it becomes the filter through which you view life. Then practice some more. And don't give up on that practice. You're going to have to reinforce it as you go through life. Is it work? He says. Yes. But choose a thought that transforms you. Camille chose, I love myself. It is the most powerful one he knows. You might discover another, which is great. Regardless, please do it. It is well worth it. So thought is the number one practice that we're going over today. The second one is memory. Our memory is not set in stone, is it? We know that from neuroscience. The more you remember something, especially if it's emotionally charged, the more you will reinforce the pathways connecting the neurons. The more you think about it, the stronger the memory gets. And it's not just the recall that strengthens the memory. And this was a new thought for me. Your state of mind when you remember something affects it too. If you're miserable when you remember it, you will focus on the negative parts and they will grow stronger in your memory. The opposite is also true. Recall it when you are happy, and the positive aspects will become stronger. So if you want to change a memory, and not some memories you can't make positive, but if there's aspects of it, remember that memory when you feel good about yourself, when you're happy, and see if there were happy parts in that memory and focus on them. But knowing this can be transformational. It is still the same experience. It is still your mind, but the filter is different. The filter changes a memory. It changes how the memory makes you feel and the power it has over you. And then this next part here is so important too. And I wished I would have known this years ago. If a painful memory arises, and we all have those, don't fight it or try to push it away. That's what I would do. I would push it away. Struggle reinforces the pain, like fighting quicksand. Instead, go to love. Love for yourself. Feel it. If you have to fake it, fine. It'll become real eventually. Feel the love for yourself as the memory ebbs and flows. This will take the power away. Don't fight it. Go back into that memory, feeling the love for yourself. It will shift the wiring of your memory. Do it again and again. Rewire love. Rewire love. It's your mind. You can do whatever you want. And then the third one we're going to go over today is called light switches. He tells a very interesting story about this guy named Richard Bandler. He created NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming. Some of you may be aware of that. I was not. That was a new one for me. He became well known for curing schizophrenia within hours. I didn't say that word right, but that's why you know what I mean. One of his favorite stories is about an executive that started hallucinating snakes. He needed to snap the guy back to reality. He rented a barrel of rubber snakes from a store owner who also had 3 trained real ones, 2 cobras, and 1 giant python. They put all the real snakes and all the rubber snakes in the shower and then wheeled this guy into the shower. To their surprise, he quickly recognizes the hallucinated snakes from the real and the rubber ones. When asked how, he responded, "The hallucinated snakes are see-through. Reality is solid. Hallucinations are see-through. They have no substance." They taught this man to focus on the difference between the real and the hallucinated. The man was cured. The power they had over him was gone. Now, very few of us have that scenario. So let's take this to us. Fighting fear. Do we fight fear? Yes. Fighting fear does not work. It just drags us in closer. You have to focus on what is real, on the truth. When in darkness, do not fight it. You cannot win. Just find the nearest switch and turn on the light. Find what your light switch is, and we're going to go into that a little bit more here too. And I remember from another place in this book earlier where he talked about going to the window and cleaning the window and letting the light in. Now he uses the term light switch or that analogy. James Altucher, market legend, author, and podcaster, stops negative thoughts by saying, not useful. It is a switch, a breaker of sorts that shifts the pattern of fear. I know one of my mentors uses a terminology, is it a lie or is it the truth? And determine which ones are lies and which ones are truth. Fear, when used properly, is a useful tool. It serves us well when possible real danger approaches. But outside of this, it hijacks the mind to the point where it is difficult to distinguish the mind and our thoughts from the fear itself. So, when fear arises, and it will, we all have that, remember that it is an hallucinated snake, or that it is not useful, it is not real. Or find your own light switch. When in darkness, have a light you've chosen, a light switch you've chosen to stand by. And you can flip the switch. Those are just two examples from this book. Got one more thing before we close for this session. And this is from the part 2, the manual. When talking about practices, you might be tempted to only do one. Don't fall in that trap. Although each is powerful, put them together and their effects compound. That's what created magic in Kamel's life. Besides, you owe it to yourself. You made a vow to love yourself. You owe it to yourself to go all in. And I like this last part here too. It's from the manual. When you love yourself and experience magic, gratitude is a natural response. When you breathe in light, then you breathe out gratitude. That's another way of doing those breaths. It leaves no space for the darkness when you breathe in light and breathe out gratitude. Do it enough times and eventually the loop runs on its own. That is where you want to be, where love and gratitude are natural expressions of each breath. Where love and gratitude are natural expressions of each breath. And that ends the presentation of the 3rd session of Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It.